A very good morning to all the participants. We would be starting the webinar sharp by 11:15, another 3-4 minutes to go. So we'll wait for some people to join it. Manisha, good morning. Can you please confirm if my screen is visible to everyone?
Yes, Gautam.
Thank you so much. So, a very good morning and a warm welcome to all the participants. Today, we would like to welcome you all on the webinar of paper deletion and right repository selections. My name is Gautam Raval. I work for customer success team for Turnitin South Asia. Along with me, I have my colleague, Ms. Manisha Shivpuri, who would be helping us on the Q&A box and the chat section. I would request all the participants to please put in their questions in the Q&A section only so that we can answer your questions one by one. The session is being conducted on Zoom as a platform, and it's also recorded for our future references. So again, we request you to please put in your questions in the Q&A box so that we can go ahead and answer your questions one by one. Additionally, at the end of the session, we will be having a live Q&A. If you have any questions and if you want to talk, you can raise your hands and we can promote you to talk and we can allow you to talk so that we can go ahead and have a one-on-one discussion as well. Now, so what today we would be learning in this webinar. One is paper repository options. What is Turnitin repository? Understand what are the advantages, disadvantages, when to keep the articles within the Turnitin repository and when not to. Repository settings at the admin level. How do we manage paper deletions? So that is something we'll look at. And also creating a Turnitin class and assignment in perspective of paper deletion. So today we would be more focused on in terms of paper deletion and how come, what are the certain settings that are kind of need to be enabled at an admin level? Then how can we raise the paper deletion request to the institutional admin and then so forth. Perhaps this is a very important webinar we say and most asked functionalities by all of the users across the Turnitin, wherein managing these repositories become very easier. So I would just request so that we can look into the session one by one. So first, what I will do is, first I will talk about Turnitin repositories. Then the Turnitin repository is a vast database where submitted papers are checked for similarity against existing content. So Turnitin has certain set of repositories which include student submission, academic journals, books, and web content. So these are the huge range of repositories. Now, when I talk about the depth, quality, longevity, and the breadth, so for any kind of in text similarity software, database becomes the backbone, and that is why most of the institutes rely on Turnitin for their integrity verification. Now, when I talk about this particular piece of database, that is 1.9 million student papers. So this is where when you as an instructor are kind of submitting the papers, and if you allow to choose the paper to be submitted within the standard paper repository will be saved. That is the Turnitin's global repository. So today we need to understand when do we kind of put in the papers in the repository and when not to. So that is something that we'll look at in detail. So this is something that we'll kind of be focusing on the student papers, that when do we allow, when do we kind of submit the papers in the repository and when not to. Now, paper repository options. What are paper repository options? Depending on your institution's account settings, an instructor can choose whether submissions to their assignment enter into the repository or not. So whenever we as an instructors are creating Turnitin classes assignment, we can have those necessary settings set up that whether we want to put the paper into the repository or not to put the paper into the repository. When do we put the papers into the repository and when not to put the papers into the repository? We'll also have those use cases discussed today in a while. Submissions that are stored in Turnitin repository or your institution's private repository are used for future comparison for the future submissions to highlight any similarities. So that is why I was saying we'll also discuss the use cases that when you want the papers to be stored in the repository and when you do not want the papers to be stored. So this is what Turnitin repository meant by. Now let's look at what are the repository options. So while we are creating the options, so there are different kinds of repository options that we give. Let us look at all of these options one by one. One is standard paper repository. What is standard paper repository? Any and every paper that you kind of select using standard paper repository would be saved in Turnitin's repository. So, for instances, you're a teacher and I'm a student. You have asked me to write an environment essay, wherein I write an essay, version 1, and submit. So you have selected standard paper repository while creating the assignment and you put up the paper to check for similarity. It comes up to be 40% similarity index. You as an instructor, faculty member, teacher say that go back and rework. This is not acceptable. I go back and rework. I submit a version 2 of the same essay. Modifying and changes, I'll do and submit a version 2. Moment I submit version 2, as you have saved the version 1 in standard paper repository, it will compare it to the earlier version and show up a higher percentage of similarity. So that is why we need to understand when do we use standard paper repository. That is where it says submissions are stored in Turnitin's global repository. So if you want to check the same paper multiple times, please use do not store the submitted papers, which says a similarity report will be generated for submissions, but submissions will not be stored to the standard paper repository or institutional repository for future comparison. Now, if you want to check the same paper multiple times, and that is the exact use case. Why? Because when we are kind of working on some project, we want to check the same chapter multiple times. So when you're wanting to check the same paper multiple times, still it is not finalized, please use do not store the submitted papers. So that is the ideal repository option that you need to select while creating the assignment. So that is do not store the submitted papers. When do we use standard paper repository? When your paper is finally approved internally, externally, when your paper is completed, evaluated, and you as a faculty member do not want the same original content to be copied by somebody else, then you can go ahead and save the papers in the standard paper repository to safeguard that particular student, scholars, authentic original work. That is the use case of the standard paper repository. Once your paper is finalized, approved internally, externally, no work is required to do on that, then you kind of go ahead and save that in the standard paper repository to safeguard your authentic original work of your students. Institutional paper repository, when I talk about institutional paper repository, submissions are stored in the repository, which is only accessible by your institution. And the use case of institutional paper repository is to identify the student collusion. If students are copy pasting from each other and submitting the assignments, that is where the institutional paper repository will be helpful. Again, this is only available with an application called as Turnitin Feedback Studio. So that please make a note of all of people, the users who are having Feedback Studio as an application, they can make use of this institutional paper repository. Again, once the institutional paper repository is utilized, we need to make sure that we are evaluating the papers only on the due date of the assignment when it has been set. So that is how we can kind of, the percentages will be matching up, and then we can have a fair evaluation within the classroom that we are trying to check for student collusions. Now, standard paper repository, please do not select if you want to check the paper multiple times. Please select do not store the submitted papers. Standard paper repositories need to be selected only when you want, when you're kind of sure and you do not want to kind of rework on that paper, then only go ahead and select standard paper repository. Institutional paper repository is for student collusion. However, if you're still not clear about what paper repository to select when, the ideal recommended option is the third one, that is do not store the submitted papers. You can have this repository option selected and can check the same paper multiple times. Now, let's get into the application. So before we get into the application, we will first look at what are the necessary repository settings required at an administrator level. So within an administrator account, the institutional university administrator first needs to kind of look into the setting options. So to begin, customize your Turnitin account settings, select the gear icon alongside the account or the sub account which we wish to edit. So we come to this edit option like this. So once we come to this edit option, so there are certain things that we have options like modifying accounts. So here we need to kind of make sure that under these allow features over here, this option like paper deletion request needs to be enabled at an admin level. So once this particular option is enabled at an admin level, then the instructors can go ahead and kind of raise the deletion request. So the first point is that get to the administrator account, look for edit option settings. Once you come for edit option settings, come under modify accounts and look for paper deletion requests. Once you enable this, then on the same page, when we kind of scroll down, the next option is the repository settings at administrator account. So there are three options. One, enable instructor standard repository option. This is recommended for originality check users. So this is where we kind of enable it so that we have an option of standard paper repository as well as do not store the submitted papers. So both of the options are available. Enable instructor expanded repository is an recommended option for feedback studio users, where institutional paper repository along with standard paper repository as well as do not submit the papers to the repository. All these three options would be available. The third option is submit all papers to standard paper repository. This is something again that we may not want to go ahead and select that at an admin level. So for OC users, the recommended option is originality check users. The recommended option is enable instructor standard repository option. For feedback studio users, enable instructor expanded repository option is something that we need to enable at the admin level. So what we will do is, let's put all into practice and let's log in live into the platform. So what I would do is, I would first like to go ahead and just log in within the administrator account and just want to explain the settings that we have just gone through within the administrator. So I've just come to www.turnitin.com. I have given my user ID and password. Once I've given my user ID and password, this is how my administrator account looks like. Now, so either it could be a primary account wherein you want to edit the account settings, or it could be a sub accounts where you want to go ahead and edit the settings as well. So if I kind of click on this edit account settings, so this is something which we as institutional administrators are enabling the deletion request process to the instructors. So these are some certain necessary settings. So within this modified account, as in these features, wherein we need to kind of allow these features under modify account, we kind of look for these features like online grading, peer mark review, grade discussion, discussion boards, translated matching, and the paper deletion request. So this is something important that we need to enable this paper deletion request. And we go ahead and look for these repository options that which are available. So once I scroll down over here, papers repository option 1. So for OC users, originality check users, enable instructor standard repository option. For feedback studio users, enable instructor expanded repository options. So select these options or one of these options for any users, but please do not select the third option by default. So once I kind of go ahead and look for these settings like paper deletion request, then these paper repository options, then I can go ahead and click on submit. So this allows instructors to kind of enable the paper deletion. So they can request for paper deletion to the institutional administrator. So how they can kind of request now. Once I do that at an admin level, now the process is instructor needs to raise the paper deletion to the institutional administrator. Now, how can the instructor raise the paper deletion? If a submission is added to the repository accidentally, or it needs to be removed for any other reason, instructors are now able to send the request to their administrator asking for permanent deletion of the submission. We no longer need to write it to the support team for paper deletion. We no need to write to kind of reach out to your account managers for any kind of help regarding paper deletion. But instructors, I kind of request faculty members to please look at this process very attentively, because what happens is, moment you kind of remove the papers from inbox or you delete the assignments, then it kind of really becomes difficult to restore those papers and then raise a paper deletion. So that is why, again, to reinforce, paper deletion is now available with all of the instructors if they have saved the papers to the standard paper repository. So instructor can make a deletion request, administrator receives a mail and a message, administrator reviews the request and approves the report and grading approves the request and the paper is being deleted. If he rejects the request, then the rejection, but that is highly unlikely that the administrator want to reject it. But once they approve, what deleting a submission from repository means what? Once the approval, post approval, removal of the original submission from the assignment inbox, delete the similarity report, and if any grading is associated, and no longer appears as a match to any future similar submissions. So once we delete the paper, it is permanently deleted from the repository, and once deleted submissions cannot be recovered. So that is how easy deletion process is. It's just that the instructor needs to request, administrator gets an email, reviews the request, and the approval is done. However, before even reaching to this place, if we kind of select the right repository option at the assignment setting, it would be a lot helpful. Now, so once the request, so how do we do that? Come to the page or come to the page within the Turnitin application where you see the similarity percentage. So once you come over there, click on these three dots over here and request for permanent deletion. So so once the admin has enabled all of those options at the administrator account, then this particular option of request for permanent deletion would be enabled to you as an instructor. So once you request for permanent deletion, what happens is next that you kind of go ahead and click on continue. You select the reason. So it will kind of ask you to select the reason. Once you select the reason and then you kind of go type in delete. Once you type in delete, now it goes to your administrator for pending for deletion. So this icon would be visible for you on this percentage where you're, or on the paper uploaded thread where you kind of see that this particular option is visible over here, pending for deletion. But what happens is instructors remove the paper only from the assignment inbox. That is only removed from the assignment inbox, but that is not permanently deleted. So removing the paper from inbox means it is only taken off from the interface, but requesting for permanent deletion is something that the instructors need to look at. Request for permanent deletion, type in the details, select the reason. Once you select the reason, then you kind of go ahead and kind of submit that particular paper for deletion. One more thing. Here it is a very important thing to look at. If the assignment settings were changed to no repository after submission, the setting needs to be restored to standard paper repository in order to complete the paper deletion request. Now, usually what happens is, while creating the assignment, they select standard paper repository and create the assignment. And later they realize that this is the problem. It saves into repository and it compares to our earlier submitted versions. Then they go ahead and change it to no repository and no repository option. Please don't do that. Once you have selected standard paper repository option, before changing any repository option, prior to that, go back to the percentage page where you can see the percentage and make a deletion request. First, get all the papers deleted which are saved to standard paper repository. Once you kind of delete those papers which are saved to standard paper repository, then go ahead and make changes to your repository options at the assignment level. So this is how we kind of, now what we have understood is we have looked for administrator, we have looked for administrator settings. Then we have kind of logged in into administrator account. And then we kind of looked at what are the administrator settings. We looked at instructor settings. How can instructor raise a paper deletion? So with this, what we will do is we will go ahead and now log in into the live platform for the instructors. So this is my Turnitin account over here. So once I kind of log in into my Turnitin account and let me get into the instructor interface. So this is my instructor interface. Again, you will not see so many tabs. It's my kind of an demo account. So I have so many tabs. So let's refer to this as an instructor tab, where on the left-hand side, you will look for your name. Right-hand side, there is an option for add class. So let's start by creating a class immediately. So I'll start by creating a class by standard class. So standard class or a master class is an option. I would kind of stick to standard class. Master class is only created when we have a teaching assistant. So I'll kind of stick to standard class. However, I'm kind of running through these functionalities as, so I can give in the class name. So I say 11 Feb webinar. So whatever is your class name, whatever is easily identical for you, please give in that class name. Like English, mathematics, science, you can kind of give in that particular class name. Enrollment key is a kind of a password. If students want to self-join the class, we can select the subject that we have, or we can simply select the other. Select the student level, start date and end date is by default 1 year, but we suggest to keep an actual end date of the class. So once this has been done, so I come back again to this class, which has been created over here. And I click on this particular option that is a students option. So first I create the class and then I want to go ahead and add the student. So I kind of say, so I add a student. So this is the student that I have added and I go ahead and click on submit. So moment I go ahead and click on submit, I see there is a student which has been added as well. And I can go ahead and now click on assignment. Now, when I'm clicking on assignment and I click on this add assignment, this is a very crucial step to look at. This is where most of the instructors set up the standard paper repository, even if they want to check the same paper multiple times. So we select feedback, similarity and feedback. And once we select similarity and feedback over here, we kind of given the chapter name. So I'll simply say chapter is chapter 1. So that the title is marks. If there are any instructions, standard date, start date, due date, feedback release date. And this is the paper, submit papers too. So this option is something very important that we need to look at. So there are again three options that we discussed: standard paper repository, institutional paper repository, and do not store the submitted papers. So for some users who are using originality check, they would be having only two options, that is standard paper repository and do not store the submitted paper. Institutional paper repository is something which is only available for the Feedback Studio users. Now, standard paper repository. As we mentioned, if we select standard paper repository, all the papers would be saved in the repository, even if we are checking the paper multiple times. So now you seek this chapter 1 against this chapter 1. If there are papers which need to be submitted multiple times, please select do not store the submitted papers. That is something we need to select. So now still let me select standard paper repository and show you the deletion process, how that is worked. So I click on the submit as an option. I select the student. I kind of select paper deletion demo and I select the paper from my local computer. I kind of select this paper and upload it. So once I upload this particular paper, now it is processing for similarity. Here we are not getting any information like your file is being not added to any repository. So if you select do not store the submitted papers, you get a confirmation over here. So I go back and go ahead and confirm. So moment I do that and come to my assignment inbox, now I kind of allow a little bit of while to process it for similarity percentage. Now it says 100%. Why? Because the the copy of this paper has been already saved in the repository in another class. So that is why it says 100% similarity index. Now, how do I raise a deletion request? So if I select over here and I click on these three dots, if I remove this from inbox, it will be only removed from this interface and it will not be deleted from the repository. So that is why what I need to do is I need to kind of request for permanent deletion. So once I request for permanent deletion, click on continue, select what are the reasons. So the first reason, wrong paper submitted, remove personal data, didn't know the paper would appear in the similarity match or other. So I say I didn't know this paper would appear as a similarity match. To confirm, type in delete and confirm. So moment you do that, we see that this is an icon which is coming up, which says the paper is pending for deletion with the institutional or the university administrator. Now, if you within a particular class, if you want to look for the list of pending papers for deletion, you can look for pending deletion papers over here and you can note that. So once you make this request, is the paper deleted? No. Please reach out to your institutional administrator, ask them that they have requested for paper deletion. So I, as an institutional administrator, I can see that their paper deletion come up. So I can click on the particular account, look for this deletion request over here. Once I look for this deletion request, I see this is the author name which has already come for paper deletion. I select these and delete from database. So deleting submissions will remove the submission from the assignment inbox, delete the similarity report and grading, and no longer appears as a match for the future submissions. I said review, click on delete and delete submissions. Moment this is done, this is already deleted from the repository. So this is so easy if we follow this process. So that is why I would just request all the participants to please kind of do not remove the papers from the inbox. And now we see there's nothing pending up here for deletion and the papers are already deleted. Now, faculty members who are using quick submit as an option. So how do you enable this quick submit option? So you kind of click on this user information over here, look for activate quick submit and click on submit. So once you do that, this quick submit option would be enabled over here and you kind of look for click on submit. So once you click on submit over here, you need to select the search repositories. So these are certain search repositories you need to select to get the maximum search results. So once you do that, then you kind of again need to, so these are the search repository options. Every time you're uploading the paper onto Quick Submit, you'll have to select the repository option as no repository if you do not want the papers to be compared to the earlier version. If you select standard paper repository and check the same paper multiple times, it will crawl again. So it will compare it to again and again and show up a higher percentage of similarity index. So please always select no paper, no repository option while you're uploading via quick submit as an option. So even if you select standard paper repository and submit any paper by giving first name. So for instances, let me just demo you how if we select no repository as an option over here and kind of given my first name, last name, submission title over here. So this paper is confirming the file that you are submitting will not be added to any repository. So look for this confirmation before choosing the document from your local computer. This particular option is also available when you're creating a class, creating an assignment and submitting a paper against on behalf of any student or students are submitting. This option would be coming before you choose the paper from your local computer. So always reassure yourself by looking at this option. If this option or this information is not coming up, then please go ahead and reselect the repository options. So still, if you kind of select standard paper repository, what happens is we can still raise a request deletion over here. So to demo the deletion request, I will still again kind of go ahead and select the paper deletion. And I choose the paper from my local computer and click on upload. So moment I do that, I see the paper is getting uploaded. I see there is no notice which is coming up, like there's no piece of information which is coming up that repository being the paper being not added to any repository. So I come back to the assignment inbox and I give it a little while to process it for similarity. And I see that it has already been processed and still, so if still coming up to be in 35% of similarity index. Now, if I want to delete this particular paper, I kind of select this option over here. This yellow bar appears on top and I request for permanent deletion, the same process. I select the reason and click on delete and confirm. So moment I do that over here, I see this deletion icon pending so that you can go ahead and inform your administrator this paper I've requested for paper deletion. However, administrators would be kind of getting these messages over here on 11th Feb. There is a paper deletion request. They can click on this and they can simply go ahead and review and delete the particular paper that has come up for paper deletion. So again, I come on my paper deletion request. I see this has come up again. I select it and delete it from the database. So paper deletion is this easy when we are kind of selecting the right repository, or if you're kind of raising it in a right way. One, before that, I would again want to reiterate, I've kind of demoed how do we raise a paper deletion. More than that, what I would like to inform you is reaching to the paper deletion stage, why don't we make the right repository selection at the assignment level when we are kind of creating the assignment? Please select no repository when you're creating the assignment. So I've come into a class, I've come into an assignment which I want to create. So I say this is an assignment for chapter 2. So I kind of given chapter 2 as the assignment title over here. So given instructions, start date, end date, grades that I give, and I simply select do not store the submitted papers for the papers which I want to check multiple times, so that we do not end up into the deletion process itself. So these are some things that we need to be very mindful in terms of kind of using this particular application. So while creating the assignment, please select do not store the submitted papers if you want to check the same paper multiple times. Even if you have selected standard paper repository, we know how we kind of reason a paper deletion process if you're wanting to check the same paper multiple times. Please do not remove this from inbox. So this is something, another class, and this is a paper over here. So if you kind of allow this paper to remove from inbox, it will only be removed from inbox. Are you sure you want to remove it from inbox? That is where it is not seeking permanent deletion. So I would just like to launch a poll now, wherein I would like the participants to please participate in this poll. This is just to understand that how clearly we have understood the repository options. So now the poll would be live onto your screen. So I have simply 3 questions. It's an anonymous poll. We just want to reiterate what we have discussed. It is around polls. The first question talks about, so I would request all the people to please participate in the poll that we have. Which repository choice is advisable for the instructors to use if they want to upload the same paper multiple times, whether it is standard paper repository or do not store the submitted paper repository? Choose the correct option for the paper of the deletion process. Instructors removing the paper simply from the assignment inbox, or instructor submitting a request for paper deletion of paper to the institutional administrator. Then the third question is, say, select the most suitable response to the standard repository use case, what it is. Save the paper to the standard repository when your work is finally completed and accepted, and internally and externally. Help to safeguard the original content, or it has no specific use case and both A and B are correct. So we'll wait for another. So we have kind of 700 plus participants in the session. I would just request all the participants to please have an active engagement, because it's fine that if it will just clear our concepts on what repository option to use when. Maybe another minute or so, we will kind of wait for the poll. I'd request the participants to participate, please. Yeah. So I would kind of end the poll now and share the results. So the right answer, so let's discuss this quickly. So the thing is, which repository choice is advisable for the instructor to use if they want to upload the same paper multiple times? Again, we say most of us have selected the right answer, that do not store the submitted papers. Again, to reiterate, if we are saving the papers to standard paper repository, it will compare it to your earlier version and give up a higher percentage of similarity. Please select do not store the submitted papers. If you're not sure about which repository option to select when, the ideal recommended option is this: do not store the submitted papers. Then the second question is choose the correct option for the paper deletion process. Most of us have selected the correct answers. Instructors will kind of raise the paper deletion to the institutional administrator, and administrator gets it deleted. There is no provision that student raises it or somebody else raises it. It's the instructor who will raise the paper deletion option. The third question is the most suitable response to standard repository use case. Again, most of us got a right. Only when your work is finalized, then we may want to use standard paper repository to safeguard our original work. However, for all the larger audience to look at, if you're not sure about which repository option to select when, the ideal repository recommended option is do not store the submitted papers. So this is something that you can go ahead and use for all your assignment settings, as well as if you're submitting the papers via quick submit. These are certain resources. Again, my colleague, Ms. Manisha, would help you post these resources in the chat group. You can kind of look for these help resources on help.turnitin.com. Always know who is your institutional administrator. Please reach out to your institutional administrator first before removing the papers or making any adjustment within your Turnitin accounts, because administrators are most connected to the account managers within Turnitin so that we can guide you properly. Apart from that, some points to remember: please do not share your username and password in public domain or within your institute. Do not check the papers from other instructor accounts. Most of the time, what it happens is we tend to kind of share our user ID password. We tend to check papers from our colleagues working within the institution. Please don't do that, because once if those papers are saved to repository, to do a reverse investigation, track down the papers, that will take some time. And please ensure you share your admin contact details. As an administrator, please share your contact details within the university so that users can reach to you immediately. All communication with Turnitin support needs to be done from the admin email ID. Admin will need to kind of reach out to the support team, and please do not share the webinar recordings with anyone outside the institution as well once you have this. So we'll go ahead and take the questions now. So Manisha, are there any questions that we need to specifically answer?
Yes, Gautam. Should I read questions for you?
Uh, let me.
There are few which I think you have to. So there are few who wanted to understand the difference between feedback studio and originality check.
Okay. So feedback studio and originality check. So originality check will basically kind of help you to create a formative environment wherein in terms of creating a class assignment, and you can kind of then upload the papers. Feedback studio will, which is an flagship product of the application of Turnitin, which helps you to provide timely feedback, so that how do we kind of usually give in the feedback where there are missed citations, references, where rework is required. So it's a traditional way of giving the feedback, wherein faculty members kind of get into the classroom and may want to give in the feedback to students. But with Feedback Studio application, there are very interesting feedback features, whether it is quick marks, rubrics, voice comments, wherein there and there the feedback can be given to the instructor, students, and students can look at that feedback, rework, and kind of go ahead and resubmit the papers. So there's one more.
Yeah, there are. I think we need to, revert with the queries. There are so many. If paper deletion request after deletion paper still appeared, I already raised this bug to Turnitin, but it is still didn't solve. Okay, that they have to do separately. Yes, there is one more. Yeah. Yes, I'm sharing the link again. So as a research scholar, how do I know whether my instructor have selected my submission into standard repository or do not submit in standard repository? So this is basically the student login wanted to understand whether the instructor have selected the right repository or not. How the student will come to know, Gautam? This is the query actually. Gautam, we are not able to hear you, I think.
Sorry. It's always better to check with your instructors to what repository options that they have selected. So, and then you kind of go ahead and submit the papers. Please share the steps, ma'am. We will have the support guides mentioned to you. So let me just have the support material shared again in the chat section to you. So there's also a feedback link. I would request all the users to please kind of fill in the feedback. So that is something that is something helpful for us to kind of how the webinar went to understand, and we kind of can look at that as well for your improved suggestions. So again, the feedback link is being put. Please requesting everyone to please respond to the feedback link. Also, I would also request if any of the participants wants to talk to us, so they can raise their hand and we can allow them to talk as well.
Gautam, we have more than 50 questions in the Q&A right now.
Yes.
Uh,
So if somebody wants to talk, we can go ahead and talk. They can go ahead and talk so that we
Somebody
can.
wants to understand the similarity report, the color and the numbers appeared in result, how to identify them in the paper.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of identify that. So I'll just kind of elaborate that on it. If you're using an older version of similarity report, it has no inferences like similarity, like number and color. It is just matching to the source. It does not have any inferences. But if you're using a new version, it does have certain inferences and we need to look into it. So we'll talk about the similarity report in detail in another webinar. We have kind of planned it for paper deletion. So let's kind of stick to paper deletion and its questions on paper deletion. So there is a question from Chandan Kumar, which talks about the paper has been already submitted and it is been comparing to your earlier submissions. So I would just request you to please reach out to your institutional administrator, and administrator can reach out to the account manager within Turnitin. So we can go ahead and help this. So this will require certain interventions reaching out to support team. So we will do that.
Gautam, there is a common query which there are so many people asking about the resubmissions. How many times they are allowed to resubmit the paper, because under additional settings, resubmissions are not allowed. So it is showing to them to how to solve this issue. They wanted to understand the resubmission option.
Okay. So basically resubmission again, when we say, when we're kind of creating the assignment, we under that optional settings, we have an option generate similarity report. Generate report until the due date and allow resubmission. So immediate 3 submissions are allowed. After that, n number of submissions are allowed. However, the report will be generated only after 24 hours. So these are certain formative settings that we need to look at the optional settings when we are kind of setting up the assignment. And there are also additional options is like only generate on the due date or only generate immediately. So this is something which will not allow you to resubmit. But if you're selecting the right option, the second option within the drop down, it will help us to kind of, uh, it will allow us to kind of resubmit the paper multiple times. Yes, the recording will be shared in a day or two with all your registered email IDs.
I'm sharing the feedback link once again
Yes.
because few people are asking for the same. Just a second.
So, I will post the user material again. So this is the deletion guides which are available. If any user wants to speak to us, please you can raise your hands and we can go ahead and allow you to speak so that we can go ahead and have a short discussion only around repositories today. How to see the AI report? Again, I would just request you to please reach out to your institutional admin to check if there is the AI functionality available with the university. If that is available, then you should see alongside with the similarity report as well. Is there any deletion provision automatically after the due date which is stored? No, there is no deletion provision automatically. You as an instructor, you will need to kind of raise the deletion request. However, while you're setting up the while you're kind of setting up the assignment, please select the right repository option. If you select do not submit the if you select do not submit it to the repository, it will not compare it to your n number of submission. Yes. If you want, if you're there's an anonymous attendee who has kind of put in a question, if the option it's like while creating the assignment, if you select do not submit it to the repository, and then maybe if you want to remove it from the inbox, then you can go ahead and remove it from the inbox as well. So with Turnitin originality application also, we'll need to kind of check in. Originality check is the application name. There is the deletion option which is available. So as we have looked into the deletion demo, you can go ahead and attend, kind of raise the deletion within that application as well.
So for AI related queries, you have to check with your institution whether they have taken the AI add-on from Turnitin or not. So if they have taken the same, yes, you can see your AI report. But if the AI add-on has not been taken by your institution, yes, you won't be able to see the AI report. So you have to check with your institution whether they have taken the AI add-on or not. I think, Gautam, it is a question from Divyanshu
Ye-
Jain. If you can read why it is necessary to keep the standard repository selected to see the 100% flag. Like usually we need to cross-check in between two papers for the similarity. If we upload them, one should be checked with the standard repository on, and the second needs to be uploaded in no repository only. Else both will be uploaded on standard repository and it will be 100% for all.
So we need to understand how do we select the repository options. It's very simple. If you're wanting to check if you want to check the similarity between two papers, use institutional paper repository. If you want to kind of select standard paper repository, it is when your work is finally approved and there are no resubmissions required for that. If you want to check the same paper multiple times, please select do not store the submitted papers. if you wish to please talk, you can just raise your hand and we can allow you to talk so that we can have a detailed discussion if required. If you upload the same paper multiple times or our setting will be no repository, then the paper will save in the repository. No, if you're selecting do not store the submitted papers, and if you're kind of submitting the same paper multiple times, your papers will not be saved to any of the repositories. So you do not. There is a question from Ramakrishna sir saying that why do you need to remove the paper from the inbox? No sir, if you want to resubmit the papers, you can simply kind of select the student name and resubmit the paper. It will override the first one. You do not need to kind of remove the papers from the inbox.
Is there any delete provision automatically after due date which is stored in repository?
As I believe I've answered that already, saying that deletion is not automatic. You'll have to raise for the deletion request if you have choose standard paper repository. But that is where I meant saying, please do not select standard paper repository if you want to check the same paper multiple times where you're setting up the assignment. The ideal recommended option is do not store the submitted papers.
So, Gautam, there is one person, Mr. Srinivas Desai. He wants to speak actually. So,
Yeah, so we just a moment.
Srinivas Desai.
Yeah, so we allow him to talk.
Yeah.
Sir, you're muted. If you can please unmute and speak your question. Tell us your question.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Sir, myself, Dr. Srinivas Desai. I am the PhD coordinator here in our Kelly Technological University.
Okay, sir.
Sir, as per our guidelines, the thesis should have only the 10% of plagiarism with removing the self-plagiarism.
Right, sir.
So, could you please enlighten us on that procedure for removing the self-plagiarism?
So self-plagiarism is basically a policy, sir, which has been defined again by the UGC. So when I say if I'm pursuing my PhD program, I need to kind of publish 2 or 3 articles
Yeah.
related to my PhD topic. So when I kind of write those 2 or 3 articles, and I still may want to go ahead and use those articles in my final PhD work.
Mhm.
Can I use it as it is? No, I cannot use it as it is. If I need to use it, I need to kind of give in a self-citation to it.
Okay.
So there's a policy, sir, that is where we kind of say that even if we do not kind of cite those work, we end up into an instances of self-plagiarism. So at the end of the day, we'll have to use it appropriately as much as required to use it. And we need to end up giving a self-citation to it.
Okay. So the scholar has to cite the papers which they have published in the thesis.
Yes.
And yeah, so like once the report is generated, say for example, it comes to be around 50% or 60%,
Right.
whereas the first two references belongs to the student paper itself.
Right.
So can we just minus those scores as it is, or is there any other way of doing the same?
Proper citation has been given to the student for the paper, which are already published or which is of his own work.
Okay.
Can go ahead and exclude that in the sources and bibliographies using filter options.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, could you please repeat, sir?
So we can go ahead and exclude those things when the proper citation, bibliographic quotation is being given. We
Uh-huh.
can simply exclude that using filter options. You do not need to exclude sources.
Okay, fine, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Uh, I have, we'll take kind of next person who is willing to talk is Krishna Yadav Kumar. So if you can speak, you're muted. Dr. Ashok Parmar. see sir speaking. Mr. Rajesh. We have um,
I think Mr. Francis Jayakant, he wants to speak. He
France.
dropped a message as well. Francis Jayakant.
There's so many people at the top, but if you can see his name, if you can allow him to, Francis. Yes, Francis Jacob. Yes, sir. Now you should be able to talk.
Yeah. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Okay. Yeah. Good morning. Thanks for the nice presentation and demo.
Thank you.
I'm the system administrator, Turnitin system administrator for my institution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have two questions. One is we have subscription to Feedback Studio, but then we don't see institutional repository as one of the options.
Yeah. So that is where, sir, if I kind of go ahead and share my screen, so this institutional paper repository is available for the Feedback Studio users at the admin account settings. You please go ahead and look for these settings which has been enabled. So
Okay.
this is here you need to kind of select enable instructor expanded repository options for Feedback Studio
Okay.
users.
Okay.
You will have that repository option coming.
Okay. So, okay. Thank you for the clarification. The second question is,
Mhm.
since about, let's say, 5 or 6 months,
Mhm.
so when people raise a delete request, those requests are coming and I'm handling those requests, but the
Right.
messages are not disappearing from the interface. And
Mhm.
I was told that it is a bug and it is being looked into. Has this been resolved or it is still being, it's still work in progress?
So if that is a kind of that file, it should be resolved, but I'll still seek an update from the product team and I will reply. I'll come back to you on this, sir. I'll look for your details and I'll come back to you.
Okay, so whatever recent release requests are coming,
Right.
once those requests are honored, the
Mm-hmm.
messages don't automatically disappear, but
So
then
that is
there is
still,
a there
yeah.
is a I mean way that I was told to do handle that to refresh the screen and do that way, and that is happening. But older messages, they continue to be there. There are about 60 plus messages which continues to exist as delete requests. So please
Yeah.
ask your support team to let us know what is the latest update on that.
Noted, sir. I'll come back to you.
Yeah,
I've taken your details now.
yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This is Kamla ma'am who want to talk. Mm. I guess we are on time, 12:15. However, we do understand there are kind of I see around 85 questions which are still open and due to answer. And we have kind of couple of hands already raised, but I can just go ahead and share my email ID in the chat section. So So please kindly mail your queries so that we can kind of go ahead and talk about those deletions requests which are coming up or anything that you kind of need to have assistance for. I would again request to please fill in the feedback form for the users who are here in the session. So thank you so much for all your huge participation for this particular session. I would also thank Manisha to help us do the Q&A and the chat section. Also Kuldeep helping us setting up this session online. So thank you so much, everyone, and requesting everyone to please fill in the feedback form. And all the users would be having the recording session soon in a day or two time. Thank you so much. we'll go ahead and end the session for all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.